The Jacksonville Jaguars 2024 campaign was nothing short of disappointing. So in this video, let's go ahead and do my mock-off season for the Jacksonville Jaguars. But if you guys do go on to enjoy the video, hit the like and subscribe button. Let's hop into it. So the way the video is going to work is we are going to be doing everything that the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to be doing this offseason. We're going to begin with the team assets portion of the video, where we're just going to focus on opening up as much cap space as we physically can, so that way we can go out there and sign a bunch of key players. Then we'll talk about some team free agents, who we're going to let re-sign and who we're going to let walk. We will then go over some positional team needs, and then we'll go over our free agency plan, and then lastly, we'll be doing 2 3-round mock drafts. So to begin the video off, as I mentioned, we're going to begin with the team assets portion of the video, and well, this team has actually a decent amount of assets to work with. They have $32 million in cap space to go along with 10 total draft picks. Of those 10 total draft picks, that also does include a second, third round pick, which we'll be doing later in the video. However, $32 million is a good amount of money. It just doesn't quite get me to the number that I actually want to get to. So in order to actually open up a bit more cap space, we're going to be doing a couple of financial gymnastics. We're going to begin by giving an extension to Travon Walker, which will open up $3 million in 2025. In terms of what actual contract he's going to get, it's probably going to be a contract worth somewhere along the lines of being probably a 4-year deal, somewhere in the top 10 defensive end contracts out there. He's not a great top 5 player in the league, but he is around a top 10 defensive end, so Travon Walker will get a nice little pay increase. To open up a little bit of extra cap space in 2025, we're actually going to be restructuring 2 contracts. Those contracts are going to be Walker Little, which will open up $5 million, and Devon Hamilton, which will open up $4 million. Those are pretty easy restructure candidates that'll open up around $9 million for 2025. When it comes to cutting some players, there was a number of players I did consider, but ultimately I did decide to cut 2 players. Christian Kirk pre-June 1st will open up around $10 million, and Evan Ingram post-June 1st will get us an additional $15 million. I know that both those players are really good offensive players that have been key players these past few years, but let's just be honest, their primes are probably in the past, and they open up a lot of extra cap space. With Brian Thomas Jr. clearly being the focal point of the offense, I want to completely revolve my offense around them, and Evan Ingram and Christian Kirk, they're just getting older, more injury prone, less productive, so I kind of viewed them as being a little bit more expendable. They open up a combined $25 million. So we were initially at $32 million, but now we are all the way up to the good old $69 million of cap space to work with. Let's now go ahead and talk about some team free agents. So the good news just keeps on coming for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Their team free agents this year aren't really all that important. You got guys like Mac Jones, CJ Beathard, Andre Sisco, Dearness Johnson, Luke Farrell, Brandon Sheriff, Caleb Johnson, and Jeremiah Ledbetter. A lot of those guys, some of those guys were starters and key contributors. Obviously, Mac Jones had a pretty decent year. He got kind of better as things went on. And obviously, Brandon Sheriff has been on the team for the past few years, and Andre Sisco has as well. Now, of all the names that are on their team free agent section, there's really only one player that I did seriously consider bringing back, but ultimately, I'm not going to bring back anybody. I'm going to let everybody leave. Maybe if Mac Jones wants to come back on a cheaper deal, I'd be okay bringing him back. But to be honest with you, I don't think there's anybody on this list that really makes this team much better. The only one that I did consider was Andre Sisco, who has been a great player for this team the past couple years. A little bit inconsistent at times, but ultimately he's going to get paid more than I'm comfortable paying him. And sure, he's been productive, but this was one of the worst secondaries in the NFL last year. And so I kind of want to put a bunch of new faces in there. I just do not think that Andre Sisco is somebody who really inspires me to become something that I think he can be. So I think this Jaguars defense really needs a bit of an overhaul, which includes the secondary. And I think losing Andre Sisco is just kind of an unfortunate thing, but he's going to get paid more than I want to pay him, so I'm going to let him walk. So again, I have no team free agents that I'm going to be returning. If you want to bring back Mac Jones on a small deal, that's fine with me, but I will feel more than okay with potentially going out there in free agency and trying to find a backup quarterback who's a little bit cheaper. But okay, we now talked about the team free agents. We talked about how we're going to open up some cap space. Let's now talk about what are the team needs for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And well, I do think there are a number of needs for this team. The biggest one being probably secondary, both corner and safety. Because we let Andre Sisco go, right now we're just kind of working with Darnell Savage, Andrew Wingard, those type of guys, and those players just really don't inspire me. They don't really promote me as being a good safety unit, so getting a top tier safety in free agency is going to be a bit of a priority for me. I also think cornerback is also a bit of a need. Right now you do have guys like Tyson Campbell, who have played pretty well throughout their careers, Jarian Jones, Monerick Brown, DeAndre Prince, Ronald Darby. Like, these guys have had some decent moments. I also don't think the secondary is horrendous. I kind of think that the position that the coaching staff put them in was really bad, but I also do think this is a unit that really could use more talent, because right now the only one I feel kind of confident in is Tyson Campbell, and even then I would like to see some upgrades in that position. The next position is interior defensive line. Right now you're working with guys like Devon Hamilton and Eric Armstead, which I do think is a good foundation to work with, but if you can get a true difference maker in the draft, I definitely do think that you should consider getting one. For example, let's say a Mason Graham, who has been mocked to the Jacksonville Jaguars by many. Next is going to be a wide receiver 2. Right now, because we got rid of Christian Kirk, right now our wide receiver 2 would be probably Gabe Davis or Parker Washington or Josh Reynolds. Brian Thomas Jr. is clearly your wide receiver 1. He's one of the best young wide receivers in the league, but we need to pair him with somebody who can help create a little bit of some separation while also hopefully staying healthy. So if we can find that in free agency, I definitely do think that should be a priority. Then there's the interior of the offensive line. Walker Little and Anton Harrison have been kind of honing down the tackle positions, and even though Anton Harrison has had some flashes and has some good moments, he also has had some really bad inconsistencies, though he is a young developing player, so I feel okay with him at my right tackle position. But with the interior of the offensive line, you do have veterans like Mitch Morse, Ezra Cleveland, and because we got rid of Brandon Sheriff, probably going to need to find a bit of a replacement there. The interior of the offensive line is okay. It just could be a lot better, especially now that we're getting rid of Brandon Sheriff. Then it's going to be the tight end position. Because we got rid of Evan Ingram, right now you're really just looking at Brenton Strange, and that's it. So you're going to want to find somebody who could be a part of a rotation with Strange, or maybe potentially become the starter with Strange being the tight end too. There are some other positional needs, but I would say that those are probably the biggest positional needs. Let's now go ahead and hop into my free agency plan, and well, Jaguars fans, I think you might like it. So we're going to begin with the smallest contract first. Yes, I'm going to tease this a little bit longer because I do think that we have a really fun free agency plan, but we're going to begin with the smallest contract, and it's actually not even a position that I view as being a necessary need, but I view this as somebody who can be a part of a rotation that can be a big part if he does reach his ceiling, and that's going to be bringing in Malcolm Kuntz on a 1-year, $4 million deal. Now, Kuntz in 2023 had 8 sacks, was looking like a rising star for the Las Vegas Raiders, dealt with an injury in 2024, which was extremely unfortunate, but is looking to kind of bounce back and get a payday in 2025-26. So by bringing him in on a 1-year deal, you're going to allow him to flourish, see what he can do as being a part of your rotational defensive line. Is this a big time need? No, but I saw the talent on the board for very cheap. You can put him alongside Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines-Allen. He could be that sort of 3rd or 4th edge rusher who could be a part of a rotation. He's still coming back from injury, so it's going to take some time, but if he can reach the potential that he showed in 2023, you're talking about somebody that can get this team a couple extra sacks, which would be really nice to add to this defensive line. Then I'm going to go with the offensive side first, and we're going to begin by bringing in Trey Smith on a 4-year, $80 million deal. Now, I know his Super Bowl showcase left a little bit to be desired, but let's just be honest here. I feel like everyone in the Super Bowl on the Chiefs side left a lot to be desired. Trey Smith, I thought of the offensive line, was probably the best throughout the year. Trey Smith has been an unbelievable guard who is the most coveted guy this offseason. The Jaguars can pay him a bag. $20 million a year would make him one of, if not the highest paid offensive lineman in the NFL, at least offensive guards in the NFL. And he's worth the money. Trey Smith has been unbelievably dominant throughout his career. This year via PFF, he did not account for a single sack, had a pass blocking grade of 70.6, but more importantly, a run blocking grade of 80.8. With Liam Cohen, you know how important the interior of the offensive line is. Hell, last year we saw that with the addition of Graham Barton, who came in there, made a big difference on that Buccaneers offensive line. I think Trey Smith could have a very similar but better impact on this interior of the offensive line. They just had a bunch of good players, but nobody great. Trey Smith would be that big difference maker to really take the offensive line from being okay to being actually something really good. Then I wanted to address the tight end position with Juwan Johnson for 2-year, $14 million. Now, unfortunately, Juwan Johnson has been dealing with a couple injuries here and there, but when he is healthy, he is a very reliable target who is both a good run blocker as well as pass protector, while also being a really productive receiver who can make a couple plays here and there. Again, you have Brenton Strange, who I think you want to see what he can become. So Juwan Johnson isn't going to necessarily be a true tight end 1. I think he's going to be kind of a maybe entitled tight end 1, but in actuality, you're going to see both those guys sort of split time and play alongside each other. Juwan Johnson is a productive player, has been in the league for quite some time. You know what you're getting from him, and I do think he could be a bit of a safety valve for Trevor Lawrence when things aren't going well. And then sticking to the receiving core here, I'm going to bring in Elijah Moore on a 2-year, $16 million deal. Now, unfortunately for Elijah Moore, he hasn't quite yet had the career that a lot of us thought he could have because he hasn't really had the quarterbacks to get him the job done. Last year, he had a somewhat productive season with guys like Jameis Winston and Deshaun Deshaun Watson with the Cleveland Browns. So by bringing him in, I think hypothetically you'd put him as your wide receiver 2, with Gabe Davis being more of your deep vertical threat, Brian Thomas Jr. being your superstar, and then Elijah Moore primarily working within the slot or working on the underneath stuff. He's a yak guy. Could see him running screens and doing all that stuff. I think he's just a really smart player who I don't want to say is going to get you 1,000 yards. I don't want to, promote that, but I do think he can get you close to 800, 900 yards if the system is right for him. And I do think that Liam Cohen knows how to get the ball to his playmakers. So obviously Brian Thomas Jr. will be the go-to target, but by adding Juwan Johnson, by adding Elijah Moore, you're adding more variety to this offense of guys who could just do a little bit something different than what they already have. But those are the 3 main free agents I wanted to bring in terms of my free agency plan. I will say if you do want to bring in a backup quarterback, there are a bunch of names out there. I'll throw out Jacoby Brissett on like a 1-year, $5 million deal or something along those lines. He could be your backup quarterback and it would make a lot of sense. But the defense is a group that needs a lot of work. We already talked about Malcolm Kuntz, but now I just want to really focus in on the secondary. And I'm going to be really focusing in on the safety room and then targeting cornerback within the draft. When it comes to safeties, I think you need both a free safety and a strong safety. Again, if you want to work with Darnell Savage as your free safety, or even if you want to move him down to strong safety, you definitely could do so. But I would prefer if he wasn't a true starter, maybe a rotational piece in the secondary. But I got 2 names here, and I think a lot of fans are going to like this. We're going to begin by bringing in Jeremy Chin on a 2-year, $16 million deal. He is going to probably play more of a strong safety role, which I think is better suited for him. Now, with the Washington Commanders, he was having a bit of a breakout year. With the Carolina Panthers, he was a solid player for many years, and he kind of was floating around out there being a decent player. But last year with the Washington Commanders, he really became what a lot of us thought he could be, and he's been a really productive player for them. He's going to primarily play in the strong safety position, very good in coverage, can blitz very well, can handle tight ends, can handle slot receivers, has the speed, the physicality to really handle the position. You put him in that strong safety role with a dominant free safety who can roam around and make plays. I do think that he was going to be a very good pickup for relatively cheap, only $16 million over 2 years. Then the last player that I want to talk about in the free agents portion of the video is going to be Julian Blackmon on a 3-year, $27 million deal. Blackmon has been a consistent piece of the Colts defense for the past couple of years. Primarily, he has played strong safety, but when he has moved to free safety, has played extremely well, and I think that is where I would want him to play at for most of his time with Jacksonville. Of course, with safeties, there's going to be flexibility, there's going to be scheme fits, so if he needs to play strong safety here and there, that's totally fine. If you want to move Jeremy Chin to more of a free safety role, that's fine, but I personally view Blackmon as being a better free safety and Chin as a strong safety. But again, it just depends on the play call, so it doesn't really matter either way. Julian Blackmon is great in coverage. He's somebody who can get you some interceptions. He's just really consistent, and he's going to make a bunch of plays. A ball hawk. He just does a lot of things very well, and he would be a big time upgrade for the safety unit. You went from Andre Sisco and Darnell Savage now to Jeremy Chin and Julian Blackmon, with Darnell Savage on your bench who can be a rotational piece. I think your safety room got a lot better, and again, I'm going to focus a bit more on the cornerbacks in the draft. So hypothetically speaking, if a Will Johnson is there or a Jahdae Barron or somebody like that, I will probably be taking them in the mock drafts. So again, to kind of recap what we did in free agency, on the offensive end, we brought in Trey Smith on a 4-year, $80 million deal. We brought in Elijah Moore on a 2-year, $16 million deal. Juwan Johnson, 2 years, $14 million. And Jacoby Brissett, who we talked about a little bit, who wasn't actually a part of my plan, but probably would be smart to get a backup quarterback on a 1-year, $5 million deal. Defensively, we brought in Jeremy Chin on a 2-year, $16 million deal, Julian Blackmon on a 3-year, $27 million deal, and Malcolm Kuntz on a 1-year, $4 million deal. So after all that, we went from $69 million all the way down to $8 million left. With that extra money, you're probably prioritizing depth option, rotational pieces, or you're just bringing back your draft class, or maybe bringing back a couple free agents on your personal team that I did not talk about. But with that all said, let's now go ahead and hop into our 2 3-round mock drafts. All right, so as you can see, we are on the PFF mock draft simulator. The Jacksonville Jaguars hold the 5th overall pick, and again, we're going to be doing 3 rounds here. And as I kind of suspect the draft could go, at least player-wise, I do think Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, and Abdul Carter will be the first 4 picks. Just kind of comes down to what order do these picks go in. So this is kind of a pretty somewhat realistic scenario for the Jacksonville Jaguars with the players available. There are a number of key guys who I think this team could definitely be looking at. We'll just kind of talk about them quickly here. Mason Graham is probably the guy I'm going to end up taking here because he's just ridiculously good. Will Johnson is on the board. If you didn't go safety in free agency, you could potentially go for Malachi Starks. Luther Burden, Mike Green is shooting up draft boards. He would be so fun next to Josh Allen. Tyler Warren is also here. You could even go with an offensive lineman such as a Will Campbell or Kelvin Banks or Benjamin Morrison. In this scenario, though, I know I talked about addressing the cornerback really heavily, and Will Johnson is on the board here, but Mason Graham, in my opinion, is by far the better player. Mason Graham, I know what I'm getting in Mason Graham. With Will Johnson, there are some question marks with his overall speed, his overall technique in zone. I do think, though, in 2023, his year was a lot better than 2024, but obviously a lot of things went against Michigan in 2024, so I don't take too much from it, but Mason Graham on that defensive line would create such a strength on the defensive unit. You'd have Josh Hines Allen, Trayvon Walker, Eric Armstead, Devon Hamilton, Mason Graham, not to mention Malcolm Kuntz, who we talked about in my free agency portion. That would make a strength on the defense, and I do think we might as well go ahead and make a strength. We address the safety units heavily, so if by doing this, we really beef up the secondary with the new safeties while also beefing up the interior and honestly the edge rushing room in general. But here we are at pick 36, and there are a couple players who I'm liking on the board here. Azariah Thomas is here, who PFF has not adjusted their cornerback rankings, but I do assume that Azariah Thomas is likely going to be somebody who is a little bit higher on their boards. Darian Porter is also here, but I'm a bigger fan of both Maxwell Harrison and Azariah Thomas. Outside of them, there are some other players like Demetrius Knight, Jahad Campbell who are available. You could potentially even go Tyler Booker if you want to find a replacement for Ezra Cleveland, which I don't view as a necessary thing to do. Jalen Walker's on the board, but I expect he'll probably stay as a first round pick. I think in this situation, we're going to stick with cornerback here, stick with my overall plan, and I'm going to be picking between Maxwell Harrison and Azariah Thomas. Again, you can see they're ranking 76 at 84 and think it's a bit of a reach, but again, PFF has not adjusted or updated their cornerback rankings in a long time. A lot of these players are individual players they pick out, but I assume that they're going to adjust these in a couple weeks because both Azariah Thomas and Maxwell Harrison have had plenty of first round and early second round conversations, so don't look too far into the rankings for now. But of these two players, I think I'm going to take Azariah Thomas. 6'2", 198 pounds, really good size, only 20 he'll be 21 by the time he's in a uniform, so a very young player, very productive player. Only gave up 17 receptions with only 141 receiving yards allowed. Just a dominant player, played corner, can even play a little bit inside the box, but he's going to be primarily an outside corner. We're going to go ahead and take Azariah Thomas here. So now we are back in the pick number 70. We've addressed interior defensive line. We also addressed corner. We also addressed Trey Smith in free agency, so interior offensive line is not that big of a need. I think in this situation, I'm looking at adding a running back. Yes, you have Travis Etienne. Yes, you have Tank Bigsby, but I don't really know if I view either one of those guys as being long-term answers for that position. Travis Etienne got kind of replaced for a chunk of the season by Tank Bigsby. Now, maybe that was due to some injuries. Maybe that was just due to the coaching staff. Maybe the new coaching staff and Liam Cohen might be a bit more inclined to allow Travis Etienne to play a bit more. There's definitely a possibility of that happening, but I'm tempted to take Quinshot Judkins here, who could be a second-round pick, but if he is available at their third-round pick, I could see them taking him because he is very, I don't want to say he's Bucky Irving-like, because Bucky Irving is a lot smaller and maybe a little bit faster, but in terms of play style, Quinshot Judkins is kind of similar, both burners, speedy guys who have good vision and can bounce off players, really good in physical players. Quinshot Judkins makes a lot of sense here, but I just feel like if I do this, I might be putting a bit of a logjam in the running back room with Bigsby, Keelan Robinson, and Travis Etienne, so I think I might stay away from that one, but there are a couple players who I am going to be eyeing here. For starters, Wyatt Milam is on the board. Now, I don't know if Wyatt Milam will actually be available in the third round, but he happened to fall in this mock draft, so maybe it does end up happening. Milam does play tackle, and maybe could be a bit of a safeguard for Anton Harrison. Maybe it could be a swing tackle who could potentially get some playing time here and there. Could be that sixth offensive lineman in some packages. Or he could potentially move inside to play both center or guard and be a future replacement for Ezra Cleveland or Mitch Morse, because those guys are a little bit older. Jonas Savania is also here, who I do think is a bit more of a guard. I don't really see him playing center as much as I could potentially see Wyatt Milam. Jonas Savania might be a bit more of a physical player, but I think Wyatt Milam's technique is just a little bit better. So I think I'm going to take Wyatt Milam. He could play all 5 positions, could be a rotational player, and potentially could start if injuries do occur. Right now, if injuries do occur, I just don't know if there's anybody who I feel terribly confident in. Wyatt Milam could potentially fix that issue. Now, here we are back up at pick 88. We've kind of addressed a lot of positions: cornerback, defensive defensive interior, somebody on the offensive line. I think maybe now I go at running back here. Devin Neal, RJ Harvey, DJ Giddens. I feel really solid with a lot of those players, but I don't know. I'm a little bit uncommitted to the idea of taking somebody like that, but I do see somebody who I'm a big fan of here, and that's Andrew Makuba. Andrew Makuba is a free safety. He's somebody who I think when they update their boards, I could see Andrew Makuba moving up to being a consensus late second, early third round pick. Pick 88 might be a little far-fetched, but there is a possibility he does land here. Now, I know I addressed the safety position pretty hard by bringing in Jeremy Chin and Julian Blackman and already having Darnell Savage on the roster, but there is a talented player like Andrew Makuba on the board. I don't think you necessarily don't take him here. I mean, he's an unbelievable player. One of the best players for Texas last year that had a really productive year. I feel like we addressed so many positions that we can kind of just go best player available, and even though there are some really good players on the board like Mason Taylor, Trey Harris, Tate Ratledge, Deion Walker, I feel like the best player on the board might be Andrew Makuba here. Maybe Trey Harris you can start the conversation on, but I think I'm going to go ahead and take Andrew Makuba to really beef up this secondary, to add a lot of depth. And, I think when you have a guy like Andrew Makuba, you just find a spot for him to play at. Maybe you move Jeremy Chin around to play more of like a nickel role, or maybe you do that with Andrew Makuba. I think Andrew Makuba can be molded into a fantastic player in the NFL. Has speed, has size, has range, very physical, great at the attack point. I just think he's a good player who a lot of people are underestimating. So I'll take Andrew Makuba here. All right, so this is the first of our 2 3-round mock drafts. Let's go ahead and hop into the next one. All right, so for this mock draft, we're going to be picking different players. And again, we are back at the same situation we were with the first one, where all 4 of these guys are off the board. Last time we took Mason Graham, so I think this time we're going to go ahead and take Will Johnson. This would give us hopefully a true cornerback 1 to add alongside what you already have in Tyson Campbell. He could be your go-to guy for this position moving forward, and hopefully he does pan out, which I do think he will. All right, so we're back up at pick 36. We took Will Johnson last time. I think this time I'm either going to take interior defensive line or maybe somewhere along the offensive line here. Tyler Booker is available. And I'm a huge fan of Tyler Booker. I think he potentially could be a late first-round pick. When he gets his hands on you, I mean, dog, you're not moving. An interior offensive line of Brandon Sheriff, Ezra Cleveland, Tyler Booker, Mitch Morse. I mean, that could be just straight up disgusting. But I don't view it as being a need as much as I do think other positions are. And I see TJ Sanders here, and I think I have a really good player here. Really good run stuffer, also pretty productive pass rusher as well. Had 5 sacks last year. He can get to the quarterback, very well sized. He could also be an early second to late first round pick depending on how teams value him. You put him alongside Eric Armstead, Josh Hines Allen, Trayvon Walker. Again, you're really building a strength on that defensive line. And I think TJ Sanders is a quality player. It's a pretty deep interior defensive line class, so you could potentially get a Derek Harmon or Alfred Collins, but TJ Sanders is a fantastic player. Now back up at pick 70, and I think maybe do we double dip at corner here and take a Maxwell Hairston? Or, I mean, Azariah Thomas is on the board here, but and I just have a hard time imagining these guys actually making it this far, but they definitely could. I mean, it's a possibility. I'm maybe even looking at adding to the offensive line here with a guy like a Marcus Mbao, who I do think likely will move inside to play guard, but also could play tackle. There's also Charles Grant, who I feel pretty similar about Marcus Mbao. And then Anthony Belton has been rising up a lot of draft boards. Of these players, I'm probably going to go with Marcus Mbao. I like him at tackle because I think he has the size and the overall speed. But if you want to move him inside to play guard, I do think he could be physical enough and get the job done. You put him in hypothetically as a rotational piece, he can play most of the positions on the offensive line. So kind of similar to Wyatt Milam in the last draft. I'm going to kind of do the same thing with Marcus Mbao here. And then we're back up at pick 88. And I mean, there's some really good players here. Lathan Ransom is a great player. Nick Emanwori, I've seen some people put him in their first round. I view him more as like a late second, maybe middle second round to somewhere in the third round. More of a strong safety, so he would hypothetically be similar to a Jeremy Chin role. Again, if you want to take Nick Emanwori, maybe hypothetically Jeremy Chin plays a bit more of like a nickel. He plays a little bit more inside the box, and then Nick Emanwori, you just kind of throw him out there on certain play calls. I mean, he could be a really fantastic player, honestly, for them. Trey Harris is also back on the board, and I think I might take Trey Harris here because I just don't know how I feel about Gabe Davis. And yes, you brought in Elijah Moore to pair next to Brian Thomas Jr., but maybe you want to go with somebody like Trey Harris, who's a bit more of a physical body, has more size to him, can win 50-50 balls, great inside the red zone, very sure-handed. Route running could definitely use a bit of some work, just overall route running technique, getting off the line of scrimmage could use some work. But if he's going up against cornerback 2s or 3s, I think he could be a pretty productive player. So I think I'm going to change course here and actually go with Trey Harris. In this draft, we already took a couple good players like Will Johnson to play in the corner room, TJ Sanders to play in the interior. We took the tackle and Marcus Mbao, who can play in the interior of the offensive line. So I think we go with the skill position here. Let's go with Trey Harris to kind of mix things up. All right, but this is our second of our 2 3-round mock drafts. But you guys let me know in the comment section below, what do you guys think about my mock offseason for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and what would you change or what would you do differently? Let me know in the comments below, but I love you guys. Peace.